My wife, Ella, 32F, and I, 35M, have been together for 7 years, married for 5. Until about 2 years ago, I genuinely believed we had one of those marriages people quietly hope for. We weren't perfect, but we worked well together. We had similar personalities, similar long-term goals, and honestly, Ella always felt like the most compatible partner I'd ever had. That's why what happened 2 years ago completely blindsided me. One evening, she asked if we could sit down and talk. The tone alone told me something was wrong. Ella isn't the kind of person who dramatizes things, but that night she looked nervous in a way I had never seen before. After a long pause, she told me she had something she needed to confess. She had cheated on me. According to her, it happened during a housewarming party thrown by someone from her office. I actually remembered that night very clearly. She rarely drinks much, but occasionally she gets caught up in the social atmosphere. That night, she didn't come home until almost 4 in the morning. I remember lying in bed, checking my phone every hour. I had sent her a couple texts asking if she was okay or if she needed a ride. My main concern was that she might have been too drunk to drive. Eventually, she came home, quietly slipped into bed, and I didn't think much of it beyond assuming she had simply stayed late with coworkers. 2 months later, she told me the truth about what really happened that night. She said she slept with a coworker named Bill. At that moment, my first instinct was simple: divorce. For me, cheating had always been a hard boundary. I grew up watching a messy divorce caused by infidelity, and I promised myself I would never tolerate that kind of betrayal in my own marriage. But the situation became more complicated the longer we talked. First, Ella had confessed voluntarily. I hadn't discovered anything suspicious. Nobody had confronted her or forced her to tell me. She came to me on her own and admitted what she had done. Second, she insisted it happened only once. According to her, it was a drunken mistake that spiraled out of control in the moment. She said she regretted it immediately afterward. And third, she quit her job shortly after the confession. That part surprised me the most. I didn't ask her to leave her job. In fact, at that time I was leaning toward divorce anyway. So I even told her quitting might make things financially complicated later. But she said she wanted to prove she was serious about rebuilding trust and creating stronger boundaries. There was also something else in the back of my mind that complicated my feelings. When I was 19, long before I met Ella, I cheated on my college girlfriend during a party. It wasn't sex, just a stupid drunk kiss, but it was still betrayal. And somehow that girlfriend had forgiven me. Part of me felt like a hypocrite standing there declaring that cheating was absolutely unforgivable. So after months of painful conversations, long walks, and several therapy sessions, I made a decision that surprised even me. I decided to try to forgive her, but I made it very clear that forgiveness would come with conditions. Before we could move forward, I told Ella I needed some form of protection. Trust had been broken and rebuilding it wasn't going to happen overnight. I needed to know that if we were going to stay married, there would be real consequences if something like this ever happened again. That's when I suggested we sign a post-nuptial agreement. To my surprise, she agreed almost immediately. There was no argument, no hesitation, no attempt to negotiate it away. In fact, she said she understood why I needed it, and that she was willing to do whatever it took to show me she was serious about repairing the damage she had caused. The agreement itself wasn't meant to punish anyone unfairly. It mostly clarified things that many couples handle in prenuptial agreements anyway. For example, anything either of us owned before the marriage would remain separate if we ever divorced. But the main clause addressed infidelity. If either of us cheated in the future and the marriage ended because of it, the cheating spouse would forfeit certain shared assets. Specifically, the person who cheated would lose their claim to our jointly owned house, the car, and any spousal support. Additionally, whatever shared savings or investments remained would be divided 60-40 in favor of the partner who had been betrayed, instead of the typical 50-50 split. Both of us hired independent attorneys to review the agreement before signing it. I wanted to make sure everything was legally fair and that neither of us could later claim we had been pressured into anything. Ella signed it without complaint. At the time, that meant a lot to me. She told me the agreement actually made her feel better because it demonstrated how committed she was to earning my trust back. In her words, she never wanted to put our relationship at risk again. For a long time, it seemed like things were actually improving. The first year after the confession was difficult, but we worked through it slowly. We attended couples therapy. We rebuilt daily routines. We talked openly about boundaries and expectations. Gradually, life began to feel normal again. By the second year, the tension had faded. We laughed together again. We started making long-term plans again. Sometimes entire weeks would pass without the past even crossing my mind. I began to believe we had survived something terrible and come out stronger. Then last month I received a Facebook message that changed everything. The message was from a woman named Alice. At first, I had no idea who she was. She introduced herself as the wife of Bill, the same co-worker my wife had slept with 2 years earlier. Apparently, she had recently discovered evidence of her husband cheating while looking through his laptop and phone. During that process, she found messages and other records that revealed the affair with Ella. Her message to me was direct but polite. She simply asked if I knew about it. I replied honestly that I did. I told her Ella had confessed 2 years ago and that we had decided to try to reconcile our marriage. Alice said she was planning to divorce Bill. According to her, this wasn't the first time he had cheated. In fact, she described him as a serial cheater who had never admitted anything until she discovered the evidence herself. I told her I was sorry she was going through that. Then she shared a detail that made my stomach drop. A detail that completely changed the way I understood everything my wife had told me. For about 2 days after Alice messaged me, I couldn't think straight. I kept rereading our conversation, hoping I had misunderstood something. I wanted there to be some kind of explanation that would make this less bad. Maybe Alice had exaggerated. Maybe she had only found flirty messages and assumed more than what really happened. Maybe 5 months meant they texted on and off, but only crossed the line once. So I messaged her again and asked directly what she meant. She didn't leave room for interpretation. She said the affair between Bill and my wife was physical for around 5 months. Not emotional, not suggestive, not just inappropriate texting. Physical. Repeatedly. She told me she had found enough evidence on Bill's devices to build a rough timeline, late-night messages, deleted chats recovered from backups, hotel confirmations, photos, even calendar entries that suddenly made sense once she knew what she was looking at. According to her, they met up well over 10 times. I just stared at my phone. More than 10 times. That number did something to me mentally that I can't fully explain. Once would have been a betrayal. Twice would have been worse, but hearing that it happened over and over again across months turned the whole thing into something else entirely. What I had spent 2 years trying to forgive was in my mind one horrible night. A disgusting mistake, yes, but still something chaotic and impulsive. What Alice described wasn't chaos. It was routine. It was planned. It was deliberate. It was sustainable enough that my wife had somehow maintained it for months while still coming home to me, eating dinner with me, sleeping beside me, talking about our future with me like nothing was broken. That difference matters to me more than I can put into words. A one-night drunken screw-up is still awful, but a 5-month affair means 1,000 separate choices. It means texting first, replying, making excuses, creating lies, sneaking away, deleting evidence, coming back home and acting normal, doing it again and again and again. The more I thought about it, the more humiliated I felt. For the last 2 years, I had actually given Ella credit for something I now realize she maybe never deserved credit for in the first place. I told myself that at least she confessed voluntarily, At least she came clean. At least she chose honesty when she could have hidden everything forever. That was one of the biggest reasons I didn't leave. But now that idea started falling apart in my head. Because yes, technically she confessed, but she only confessed to the version of the affair that gave her the best chance of being forgiven. She gave me enough truth to look remorseful, but not enough truth to let me make a fully informed choice, and that distinction has been eating me alive. If she had sat me down 2 years ago and said, I had a physical affair with my coworker for 5 months and slept with him more than 10 times, I know exactly what I would have done. I would have filed for divorce. Immediately. No therapy, no reconciliation, no second chance, no post-nup as a bridge toward rebuilding. I would have been done. That means the decision I made back then wasn't really my decision at all, not in a fully honest sense. I made a life-altering choice based on an edited version of the truth, and she let me live inside that version for 2 full years. I started replaying everything from that time period in my mind, every conversation, every apology, every promise, every therapy appointment where we talked about rebuilding honesty, every time she cried and said she never wanted to hurt me again, every time she thanked me for giving her another chance. And suddenly all of it felt contaminated, because in the middle of all those emotional conversations, she still knew something I didn't. She knew the affair I was trying to forgive was much bigger than the one she described. I barely slept that week. I walked around feeling like I had been punched in the chest. Even when I was at work, even when I was doing normal things, this ugly thought kept following me everywhere. She didn't just betray me back then. She manipulated my forgiveness afterward. By the weekend, I knew I couldn't keep this inside any longer, so I sat Ella down and told her we needed to talk. And this time, I already knew more than she realized. The moment I brought up Alice's name, I saw the change in Ella's face. It was immediate, not confusion, not anger, not disbelief. It was recognition. Panic, maybe. The kind of expression a person gets when they instantly understand exactly why they've been caught. I told her Alice had contacted me. I told her what she found on Bill's devices. I told her she said the affair lasted for months, not one night. At first, Ella didn't say anything. She just sat there staring at the floor, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. The silence itself felt like an answer. I remember thinking that if Alice had been wrong, Ella would have denied it immediately. She would have looked offended, shocked, outraged, something. Instead, she looked defeated. Finally, she admitted it. Yes, it had gone on longer than she originally told me. Yes, it was physical more than once. Yes, she had intentionally left that out when she confessed 2 years ago. I asked her why, not in some dramatic way, not yelling, not even angry at first, just genuinely asking the question that mattered most to me. Why did you take away my ability to make this decision with the full truth in front of me? Her answer was exactly what I feared. She said she didn't think I would stay if I knew everything. So instead of telling me the whole story, she gave me the version she thought I could survive. That sentence has been echoing in my head ever since, because to her that probably sounds understandable. Human, desperate. She was terrified of losing me, so she minimized the damage and hoped the honesty she did offer would be enough. That's how she framed it anyway. She kept saying, I still told you. I still confessed. I was trying to do the right thing, just badly. But the way I hear it is different. What I hear is this. She knew the full truth would lead me to a different decision, so she controlled the information to control the outcome. And once I look at it that way, her original confession stops feeling brave and starts feeling strategic. She argued that the affair ended 2 years ago and that we've built so much since then. She said we've gone to therapy, cried together, rebuilt connection, and learned how to communicate better. She asked me whether I was really going to throw away 2 years of healing over details from the past. Details. That word honestly made me feel sick. because this isn't some technical correction. It's not the difference between 3 times and 4. It's the difference between one terrible mistake and a sustained relationship outside the marriage. It's the difference between me choosing to forgive something I understood and me being managed into forgiveness through selective disclosure. I told her that what hurts almost as much as the affair itself is realizing that even her so-called honesty was built around self-preservation. She didn't respect me enough to let me decide my future based on reality. She let me think I was making an informed choice when really I was responding to a carefully reduced version of what happened. And now, everything feels unstable. Even the post-nuptial agreement feels different to me. At the time, I saw it as the foundation for a second chance. Something serious but fair, created after full disclosure, reviewed by independent lawyers, signed by both of us with open eyes. Now I keep wondering whether she signed it while silently relieved that I still didn't know the real scope of her betrayal, whether she believed she had successfully managed the fallout and could move forward as long as she kept the worst parts buried. She wants us to go back to counseling. She says this doesn't erase the progress we made. She says the woman she is now isn't the same person she was then. Maybe that's true. Maybe she really has changed in a lot of ways. But the problem is that I no longer know what parts of our reconciliation were real and what parts were built on a lie by omission. And that's why I'm now seriously considering divorce again. Not because I just discovered the affair happened, but because I just discovered that the forgiveness I offered was obtained under false pretenses. If trust was shattered 2 years ago, this feels like finding out the pieces I glued back together were never